Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of this series of workshops that we are doing in association with the Cork PPN. Somebody might be on the plenary of the Cork PPN and might have attended the plenary session last Thursday evening, where I give a quick overview and presentation as to what sort of funds are out there for not-for-profit groups. For those who weren't there the last night or last day, just give you a bit of background to who I am, if this works. Yeah, so my name is Tom O'Leary. My company is O'Leary and Associates Training and Consultancy Limited. I'm based here in Kerry. We have offices in Tralee, currently operating from home and have been for the last 2 years, which is good and bad. So I have over 20 years experience working within the local development sector and community voluntary sector. I suppose primarily started off working as a development officer with a local development company in Dublin, back in Northside Partnership, back in the, I suppose, late 90s. And then I worked as a development officer with another local development company in Tralee from 2000 to 2005. And in 2005, I went full-time out on my own as a consultant, working as a mentor, a trainer, and planner with communities, developing social enterprise projects, community facilities, and community services. So my background really is working with groups like yourselves on things like feasibility analysis and studies, community planning for villages and towns, doing strategic plans and business plans for community and voluntary groups, and also then providing training courses like this for the likes of Cork PPN at the moment, Kerry PPN, local development companies, and then we do work then with mentoring with community groups as well that would need support on maybe developing specific projects. And a big part of what I do is help groups get funds and get funding. So a lot of work I do is identifying mostly capital grants and capital funding that's available for large scale projects. We would do the planning, the feasibility analysis for those projects, and then also we would assist in the grant application process with them and putting together the applications with them. So there's a lot of experience there in sourcing funds for not-for-profit organizations. And that's what I'm hoping to get across to you this evening, is looking at the kind of the various different funding options that are out there. And then looking at, in terms of each of the other workshops then we'll be doing over the next number of Monday evenings, we'll be focusing on specific elements of that, such as fundraising, grant applications, etc. So tonight's kind of like a generic kind of view of all the types of funds. And there is basically, we'll be looking at going into depth then in terms of the individual types of funding streams that are there afterwards. Okay, so the key thing I suppose we do when we talk to groups we work with, it's all about, not so much just about in terms of the funds that are out there, in terms of, you know, what grants are available, how do we fundraise, how do we get sponsors, you know, all these things which we get asked a lot. The key thing really is looking in terms of your planning, your budgeting. So it's understanding what you need to have to cover your operational costs. And then it's important to look at in terms of what sort of funding you require to develop new projects or introduce new services as you go along. So a lot of organizations like yourselves, you know, you don't just stand still and just do the same thing over and over and over again. You're constantly evolving, constantly you can provide different services and maybe facilities for your communities or for people that you're working for. So it's a lot of it is around, like any business or like any group or any organization, you have to have some sort of financial plan in place. And that's what we concentrate a lot on, is looking at your planning and your budgeting before we look at the actual sources of funds. So looking basically what every organization needs, and this is kind of an area we focus on with the groups we work with. So a lot of groups they focus completely and utterly on the money side of things, and they get bogged down in the finance and where we're going to get money from and all this kind of stuff. That's obviously very, very important, but there's more to it than that. The key thing really, if you're looking for any funding, whether it be grant aid, whether it be sponsorship, whether it be fundraising at local level, you've got to prove that there's a need for the service you're providing. You've got to prove that there's a need for the facilities you're providing. And you got to show people, look, we've done the analysis, there is a need for this locally, and this is why we need the support with it. So if you're looking to get a sponsor on board, they need to see, why should they be sponsoring this project? What's in it for them? What good would it do? What would the impact be? If you're looking for a grant, again, the same thing, you got to prove that there's a need for it. why your project deserves the money more than another project in another location or another part of the county or another part of the country. You have to back it up with a need. And very often when we're asked to help groups get funds, we would ask that question: what do you want the money for? What is it needed for? Do you need it? And what difference, what impact will it make? Okay, because sometimes groups just chase funds for the sake of it, and that's not really the best approach when you're looking for funding. Who are your clients or your customers, or whatever terminology you want to use? So there's someone out there benefiting from the work you do, whether it be if you're working with people with disabilities, if you're working with older people, working with young people, working, in a tiny towns group, the public, the community are impacted by the work you do. So it's very varied in terms of the work people do on the ground within the community volunteer sector. But someone somewhere is benefiting from the work you do, whether that be directly or indirectly. So you got to identify, well, who are we actually here to do work for? Who's going to benefit from the work we do on the ground? And sometimes that's very obvious. So again, we do a lot of work with organizations that are working within the disability sector, or working with youth groups, or working in, say, transport, or working in providing, say, family resources or family support services, counselling services, etc. And that's very, very clear because they know exactly who they're supporting. Sometimes you work with groups then, like a community council, who are kind of working on behalf of the wider community, and that might be as easy to define as maybe another organisation. It's important that you have the proper structures in place. So if you've done the proper structures in terms of governance structures, committee structures, company structures, in some cases, good volunteering support, good volunteering structures in place, good committee structures in place, the funding then is irrelevant, because there's no point in the government or an agency or funder or sponsor giving money to an organization that's not able to manage the money or able to develop the project. So it's very important to look, do you have the resources in place to do it? And that's really important, because that's a key thing that funders will look for when they're deciding on where the money is going to go to. Are you the best group to give the money to? And that's a question that has to be answered within any application. If you're targeting local people to help you with a fundraising, and you're doing backpacking or bag packing or church cake collections or a fashion show or barbecue or a golf classic, the people giving you the money need to be able to trust you that the money is going to go to, be used in the right way, it's going to be managed in the right way. And then finally, you need finance. So finance is the last bullet point there. And you might be thinking on a workshop that we're talking about finance, why isn't the first? The first three are crucial, because they will lead to the funding. If the first three aren't done right, if you don't have the needs identified, you can't clearly identify your customers are, clients are, service users are, and you don't have the proper structures in place, then the finance is irrelevant. Okay, so that's why we focus on the first three first, is that it's really important that they're in place. You've got a good solid foundation before you even go looking for any sort of funds. Because if you're writing out grant applications, that's the key. They're the three key things that you're going to show in any application. If they're not in place, then it's kind of pointless. So the question of sustainability then comes up a lot as well, in terms of, is this project sustainable? Is the project viable? Can we keep things going? Can we survive, right? And again, everyone focuses on finance when it comes to that, but it's not just finance. Again, the need for the service that you're providing must be sustainable. So I'll give an example. We would have done a lot of feasibility analysis years ago for childcare facilities that were back in early 2000s. They were heavily subsidized. There's a lot of funding out there for capital funding for new community childcare facilities, €1 million plus projects. And a lot of kind of villages and groups came to me and said, Tom, we need help getting funding to develop a childcare creche facility in our local village. And the first thing we asked them was how many kids were in the area that would be attending the creche or the preschool or whatever it might be. And they might say, we've got 30 kids at the moment, ready to looking for space. And I said, okay, well, when those kids reach the age of 4 or 5, they're going to go into junior infants in national school. How many more kids will be coming along after that to avail of the creche services? And what we would look at it was things like, say, planning applications. How many planning applications were approved in the last, say, 5 years in an area? How many buildings were being developed? How many houses were being developed? Was there property being developed in the area? In other words, was there people moving back into the community? If there wasn't people coming into the community, no families moving in, then the population would either stay static or would decrease, but the number of newborns in the community would drop. So therefore, the need for the creche long term wouldn't be there. So therefore, the creche would find it hard to sustain its services over a period of time. So when we're doing, say, analysis of projects like that, or older persons projects or social housing projects or whatever it might be, we look at what's the current need for the service and what's the long-term need for the service, and is it sustainable long-term. Okay, so a lot of schools, for example, in rural areas are under pressure because there's very few new enrollments, so they're finding it hard to survive because they just don't have the numbers to maintain the school. And that's an example of where the need for the service, even though it might be there now, might be sustainable long term. The structures, can they be sustained? Huge issue at the moment is volunteer burnout. A lot of volunteers have left because they were doing nothing for. And I said they were doing nothing. They were the capacity to do anything during COVID was restricted because people couldn't meet. You couldn't go out and tight towns groups, for example, couldn't go out and about doing their work every week they were doing. So a lot of volunteers were kind of on hold for a while, and a lot of them haven't come back into the sector. So there's a lot of pressure on now community volunteer organizations to maintain their services because they literally don't have the volunteer staff, or they don't have the actual paid staff to do the work on the ground. So the structures are struggling. And then finally, look at finance. So the key thing with finance is that you have to have enough money coming in every week, every month to cover money that's going out. So it's no difference between our household budget. You've got to have money coming in every week to cover food, mortgage, your Sky subscription, clothes, social life, whatever it might be, whatever your outgoings are. There's got enough money to come in to cover what's going out. Okay. The difference between the community voluntary sector and a normal business or a normal household is there's no guarantee of that funding every week. There's no guaranteed paycheck coming in every month, or there's no guaranteed sales every month if it's a business. So you're always constantly looking for ways of bringing money in to cover all the money going out. And that's where it becomes fairly stressful for a lot of organizations that are struggling to kind of break even every year just to keep literally enough money coming in to cover money going out. Sometimes that's down to just there's no finance there. But more often than not, it's down to just bad budgeting and bad planning, where they haven't looked forward in terms of, right, when do we need money? When is the big, when is the insurance due? When is our oil fill due? When is when is our big payments out due? And they don't plan for it, so they start panicking then when that money becomes, when that bill comes in or the invoice comes in. So the key thing we always say to our organizations we work is that you have to think like a business. If you're a not-for-profit organization, which all of you are, you need to think like a business though, because a business has to survive. It's got no other option. It has to make a profit, has to survive. If you're a not-for-profit organization, you have to do the same thing. But some people think that because they're not-for-profit, it means they can't make a profit. Okay, the key thing I want you to think about and kind of based in kind of write down somewhere in your on your desk or in your head or wherever, is that just because you're not for profit doesn't mean you're not for loss. Okay, we would have a lot of arguments over the years with organizations who said that we're not going to grant this organization because they've got a reserve in their account, they've got savings in their bank account, they've got savings in a credit union, they're doing very, very well. And I would use the argument, well, they're not for loss. They need to have this money in the account because if there's the boiler breaks down, or if there's a roof blows off in a storm, they need money to be able to replace that. They need money for certain things throughout the year. It's a prudent way to operate on your organization to have a reserve in place. So you need to have a profit there. If you're just operating on a literally week by week basis, on a break-even basis, you're going to run into problems when an unforeseen cost comes up. Volunteers then be asked to pay for that out of their own pocket because there's not enough money in the account to pay for it. Also, you can never expand and develop your services if you don't have a reserve, because every grant you apply for, you have to have matching funds. Okay, if you don't have money in the account as matching funds, you can't apply for the grant. Okay, you can borrow money to come up with the matching funds, but most grants would have a minimum amount of cash matching that's required. So if you don't have a reserve, you've nothing. If you've nothing left in the bank account at the end of every year, nothing held back in reserves or in savings, you're not in a position to apply for grants. So even though you're not for profit, you need to be focused on making more money than you need, because you will need that money at some stage. Okay, so the most important thing in any business, whether it be not-for-profit business or for-profit business, is cash flow. Okay, you have to make sure that there's more money coming in than going out. That's why planning is really important, because you need to know when that money is going to go out, so it's going to be in the account to cover it. So you can't do panic fundraising. For example, if you realize that, like, say at the end of May, your insurance bill is of 4,000 euros is due, you look at the bank account, there's nothing in it, you're not going to be able to raise 4,000 euros in 3 weeks. Not a hope. It won't happen. knowing if it's due in 3 months' time, yes, you have 3 months now to raise the money. That's possible. So it's all again about planning and being organized when it comes to finance. Some organizations are very good at doing it. They generate a lot of funding every year. They maximize the amount of grant aid they can get. They maximize the sponsorship they can get. To maximize fundraising they can do because they're very organized, very well planned. Sorry, they have very good plans in place and they're very organized. And they just keep that system going constantly throughout every year. And they manage to do pretty well out of it. Other organizations are all over the place in terms of chasing money, panicking, stressed out as volunteers. Like if you're a volunteer, you've enough stress in your life than being stressed out about the voluntary work you do. But a lot of people are, because the cash flow isn't there to sustain the organization. So when you're looking at the financial analysis, then, so we're looking at, okay, what do we need money for? This is the key question that we ask all our groups we work with. What do you need money for? Okay, because you need to know what your costs are to understand what you need to bring in. So if you have no idea what you're spending every year, you'll have no idea what you need to bring in every year. Okay, so you do cost analysis. Can you cut back on your costs? A lot of organizations can't, some organizations can. We have a lot of groups now we work with doing energy audits because they're spending way too much money on energy and lights and heat in their buildings. So they're looking to see, can they get better insulation in? Can they replace their lights with LED lights? Can they bring in a new heating system into the building? Can they reduce those big bills every year? Then you've got groups that are looking at new projects. So they might be looking at, developing new projects that might be extensions to buildings, bringing new services, purchasing a new vehicle, taking on new staff, whatever it might be. And those new projects will require two things. They'll require startup costs. So they'll need money to if it's an extension, to build the extension. But then those new projects will add to your operational costs. So if you extend your building and double the size space you have, if you've got a community center or a family resource center or GA club or whatever it might be, and you add on more buildings to the existing building and extend, that's going to increase your operational costs. So you got to look at long term. Okay, we can get the money to maybe build this thing, but can we get the money to cover the costs of it? We would deal a lot of groups that would be, let's say, purchasing vehicles or getting vehicles sponsored or donated, which is fantastic. But you need to then figure out, okay, well, how are we going to cover the costs of driving that vehicle? How are we going to pay a driver? How are we going to pay for diesel? How are we going to pay for maintenance, tax and insurance, etc.? So you're always looking at in terms, okay, if we build this, which is fantastic, we've got money to do it, what would the operational costs be afterwards if it's up and running? So there are kind of analysis you need to do, like any household would do, or any business would do, and any not-for-profit organization should do as well. So we look at a breakdown like this in terms of a very simple cost sheet over the 12 months, and we say, okay, what's the insurance costs, and when's that insurance due? So we will say, okay, we'd ask the group to go back and tell us when your insurance policy is up for renewal. So it might be in June. So we mark in on June here what that insurance is. Now we know that there's a big bill coming out in June, so we aim for it. If they are paying wages, that's going to be monthly. If they're obviously utility bills, will be every 2 months. If they have a loan, which they might have, a lot of groups we have would have outstanding debt. Again, what are loan repayments every month? If they're paying for security, professional fees, repairs, etc., and just go down and list all the costs you might have, and mark out, are they monthly costs or are they kind of irregular costs that we would have maybe once a year? Does our accountant charge us once a year, or do we pay a direct debit once a month? Again, if you pay once a year, that's a substantial bill once every year. If you spread out of 12 months, it'll ease the pain slightly. So again, you're looking at how we can analyze our costs, how we get those costs down, and how we can spread those costs maybe out throughout the year, rather than having kind of these large bills, killing us every few months. And that's really important. Before you look at any funding sources, you need to understand your cost base, because everything's factored around that. Okay, so a lot of groups don't do this. As I said, they panic because they don't realize, or accountant's bill is due in December. Then they're starting to negotiate with the accountant. We pay you off in 3 installments, this sort of stuff. So again, just think about it logically. You do it at home. You could do it already in your own organizations. I'm not saying you aren't doing it, but you need to start looking at looking over a 12-month period. When is the money going out? When are the substantial months in terms of payments that we need to factor in? For example, if you've got a loan, it might be a term loan over 5 years. Is there possibilities of pushing that loan out over maybe 8 years to bring your monthly costs down? Okay, so again, all these things you'll be looking at. if you're looking at construction projects or new projects, which some of you might be, so for example, the community centre, family resource centre, we're doing 4 projects at the moment that are involving renovation of existing buildings into multi-purpose buildings. You got professional fees, so construction drawings, QS fees, planning fees. These are all fees that are going to be, need to be paid before any funding is going to be sought to build something. Once all that's in place, you got planning in place, you've all that work done, then you got the construction costs to worry about. And then once the construction is complete, you got the fit out costs to worry about. So what we would do is we break down where can we get a grant for these things? Yeah, possibly for this, you get maybe feasibility study grant to cover some of these, not the planning fees, but certainly some of these costs. You get capital funding for construction costs, and then we might look for other grant aid or maybe sponsors to look at the fit out costs. So we'll break down what are the costs involved in developing a project, and then we're trying to assign a potential grant or source of funding for each element of it. Otherwise, if you look at it, you'd be thinking, this could be €1 million project. How are we going to finance this? And people panic and they just don't do it because it becomes overwhelming. So you need to break it down into kind of phases or categories, and then see is there a way of getting funding for each element of the project, just to split the funds out and to maximize the funding available. So we use kind of what we call a cocktail of funds for most of these projects. We look at multiple sources of funding for different elements of it. And there's lots of ways you can do that. So in some cases, you might have a situation when you are developing a project, the group might only have enough money to literally build a shell and core, like literally a building, and then nothing to cover the fit out costs. That's fine, you build it and then you try to fit it out afterwards with other smaller grants. Okay, or you maybe get contribution from local companies, whatever it might be. So we were working with a sports facility there in North Kerry for a few years. They got a lot of grants, and they did it bit by bit, phase it themselves. They kind of did it by kind of like direct labor, and they opened up the building and operated without any showers because they had enough money to put in showers. And then over time, they got money to put in showers. So they did it bit by bit, and it got done. It just got done a lot slower than they were hoping to do it, but they did it without any debt, which is hugely impressive. So there's always ways of doing things, but you need to sit down and look at, can we spread this out in different ways? Can we get different funds for different parts of the project? Okay, so the budget then. So you look at your cost analysis, and then what we look at up here in the top part of the budget is, okay, where's the money going to come from? Okay, so again, it's about planning. So you might have a number of different sources. So you might have fees coming in. So you might be charging fees for services. You might be renting space within a building. So you might have rental fees coming in. You might be doing fundraising, and fundraising is important because, again, you're not going to fundraise every month. You might be doing a lotto every month, but that, any of the large fundraisers you won't be doing every month. So you might decide, okay, we're going to do one large fundraiser in the year. We might do it in May. It might be like a golf classic. So that's going to be in May. The money for that will come in probably in April, maybe some in May, and then some late comers will pay in June. So maybe sponsors you got them and pay up. When there's a bit of pressure put on, they might pay it in June. So over 3 months, the money is going to come in. You might look at sponsors. So when you're going to target your sponsors, and then with grants, then your grants will come in as they become available, and as when they're open for applications. So you can't, in some cases you can kind of estimate kind of roughly what time of the year they'll be made available, but sometimes the time frames change and the deadlines change. So it's not something you can really project that accurately going forward. As they come in, you can because you'll be given like plenty of notice before the grants are due, so you can start implementing the budget then at that point. So the most important thing is that the money coming in up here will cover all the expenses going out here. Okay, so similar to your household budget, if this was a household budget, you'd have mortgage, food, car expenses, holiday, kids' clothes, kids' shoes, books, education, college fees, whatever it is, right? And then up here in your income, you'd have your salaries, children's allowance, social welfare payments, rental of property, whatever your source of income are, you'd have up here. And you're trying to figure out how we're going to make sure we can cover all the costs going out in the bottom line by making sure there's money coming in the top line. Okay, so no different from what you're doing at home. You'll be doing the exact same thing in your organization. The only difference is that there is multiple expenses coming out of your organization, and there's also multiple sources of income coming into your organization too, which can be a bit more difficult in terms of managing that than, say, a typical household budget or a typical company or business. Okay, so before I'm going to just stop this share for screen for a second. So before we move on to the source of finance, just in terms of, are any of your organizations looking at the moment, or potentially down the line, looking at developing new projects that you're going to be looking for funding for, like capital projects? And yeah, you're looking at, when you set there, Anne? Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So a building project, is it, Anne?
No, developing a pitch.
Oh, very good again. So an AstroTurf pitch is then?
Either AstroTurf and green grass.
Okay. For GA or soccer or multi-sport?
GA.
Okay, perfect. Very good stuff. So you're looking, so sports capital application is your main source, so sports capital grants.
Sports capital, right?
Yep. Okay. Anyone else looking at? Sorry, Anne, is this, yeah, Anne O'Neill?
Roof for a community centre, replacing a roof.
Okay. Okay, there's a community centre grant just been announced there recently. They might be familiar with, and that's July, I think it is the deadline for that. So again, that there's options there. You know, I think it's up to 300,000 euros. So depending on the state of the roof, that should go a fair distance through it, you know.
Yep.
Yep, very good. Anyone else looking at capital projects?
We would be looking for building a canopy for the childcare building in our family resource center.
Very good, perfect. So an outdoor canopy, and Verdana, is it an outdoor canopy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, relining a swimming pool.
Sorry. Gavin Folk speaking. I'm wearing two different hats.
Yep.
I'm chair of our local community hall for about 10 years here in Inishannon. Our problem there is we've obviously had no income for the last 2 years, bar about 3 or 4 weeks, and it's very slow to start again. And we've obviously some ongoing costs. So that is an immediate problem. But the long-term problem is we normally have enough money to meet petty vandalism, repairs, and meet our normal costs. But our hall was built by voluntary labour in 1968 and is way past its sell-by date.
Okay.
And we need to build a fund for rebuilding. And what we find is we can get amenity grants, we can get various grants, and we've been reasonably successful, but there's nobody will give us money to, if you like, put under our bed or with our pile of acorns that we're trying to build for the future. Yep. So that's a problem, and we're really very bad at trying to increase that pot of gold, so to speak.
Okay. Totally
separately, I'm the secretary of the Knockavilla, which is Inishannon and Knockavilla Friendship Club for the older people in the community. We normally just meet once a week, and again, we haven't met until recently because of the COVID problem. And the profit we make on the tea and coffee in the morning and the once a week meeting usually goes to pay for the bus for our annual outing. We actually have planned an annual outing for this coming Thursday. It's an €80 cost per person, which is a lot higher than usual, because we don't have the funds to sponsor the coach, and the coach hire is £800 for the day. Okay. And just in case anybody else is interested, we have managed to get a tour of the Black Pudding Factory in Clonakilty, where you end up with a light breakfast. So others planning might like to think or know about.
Good stuff. So I was going to get something free.
So I'm looking for some immediate sponsorship for the bus. And I'll be honest, as you've implied already, we haven't been terribly successful at that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks, Cam. Okay, anyone else looking at any particular funding source that's element in terms of capital funding?
We'd be looking for capital funding for a 200-metre athletics track towards the end of this year. We'd be in the position maybe to go for capital funds then.
Very good. Deirdre, where are you based, Deirdre?
Boyne in North Cork.
Okay, yeah, perfect. And you have site and all that in place?
We've site and planning and everything, yeah.
Auburn, in case you're shovel ready.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Yeah, perfect. Brilliant. Okay, very good. Keith says raise your hand there.
Yeah. It's
Yep.
just to say, we've been running in Baltimore. We've got a community pool, the Wild Atlantic Pool and Leisure Centre down there,
Mhm.
which it's quite elderly. It was put there in about 1998, and bits keep on. We've got to sort of try and forward plan, but eventually we're going to have to actually retile the swimming pool, its shell itself, which is an enormous task. And I'm not quite sure where we can look for funding that, whether we count it actually as a community centre or what. But anyway, I would like to have some sort of forward planning for actually getting that done. But at the moment, I can't really see the way forward.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Yeah, so is it for full refurbishment of the pool, Sigita?
Well, it's in an old building. It's in the old industrial school, one of the old industrial school
Yep.
buildings, and it's and we've been doing bits and pieces. Like our aim has been to cut costs, reduce our energy consumption. The
Mhm.
community have been running it since 2009, so we've sort of picked up from there. So we've installed things like heat pumps, insulation. We've done part of our sort of like double glazing. We've got an end of the building which we need to do, but that's got to be coordinated with another task that we need. And otherwise it's a bit hand to mouth, basically. But the relining of the swimming pool would mean that we've got to take off the present tiles and take all of that away and redo it. So it's going to be an expensive and quite a long time, job. And
Okay.
yeah, and again, it's a matter of how we continue to make sure that we've got our income while the pool's out of action.
Okay. Yeah, we can. Yeah, there's a couple things there in terms of like that you could look at. It's again the cost of the issue. I suppose a lot of sports facilities that you have the sports capital funding is the main kind of show in town for sports projects, but the maximum funds are 150,000 euros. So for larger scale projects, it doesn't really go that far. But there is, then the issue with a lot of the other funds is that they won't fund sports projects because of the fact that sports capital does fund sports projects. So sometimes you get kind of caught between two stools as such. Now I know Leader have looked at funding sports facilities in the past where there's a kind of a proven community use of the facility. So that's something that you could look at as well. I know, for example, a lot of GA clubs, soccer clubs would have put in all, say, walking tracks around the perimeter of their pitches, which would be flooded as community walking spaces for, especially in rural areas where people can walk on the roads. And that allowed them then to draw down funding under Leader, or they made their facilities available for the wider community, not just for their members, but for the wider community, like say the local school or disability organizations or old people's groups or whatever it might be. So you can start availing of community grants if you make the facility available to community. Now, presuming obviously the swimming pool is a community pool, so, and the building itself is, so there is probably options there to look at as well down the line. But there, again, we can see what's available and at any one time and maybe give some advice on that. But no, I suppose what I want to see is get an idea in terms of where the areas you need to focus on. So if you're coming on the other workshops, I can then start finding information that's relevant to your projects and maybe look at those in particular rather than just kind of giving generic information over the next couple of workshops about different grants that are not relevant to you. I can start looking for funding that would be relevant to you, if that makes sense. Is that okay?
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So just going back to the screen share then. Okay, so the source of finance is so when we look at your financial planning in terms of your cost analysis, new projects you're trying to develop, what money you need to bring in every year, what's our target budget every year do we need to bring in and source. Then we look at source of finance, and I use this kind of this image a lot when we talk about source of finance for both startup businesses and for community voluntary organizations, because this what literally happens is people, they literally panic into kind of the last minute, kind of the last resource in terms of where the money is going to come from. And a lot of times in the community voluntary sector, it's the volunteers that are asked to put a hand in their pocket and to support the project. And I would know a lot of voluntary directors of companies who would literally bail out their organization, not every year, but in many, in some cases, a number of different times, because there just wasn't enough money there to cover the outgoings. and they wanted to keep the facility going, and they bailed it out themselves. Now, that's not obviously ideal, because then the persons actually, or the people themselves, are the ones that are subsidizing the organizations. Not only do they volunteer in their time, they're also putting their own money into it, which is not an ideal situation. Now, some people do because they want to, but when you're doing it because you have to, that's a different scenario. So the source of funding then that we would concentrate on, the first thing we always look at, is there a way of generating an income from the services or the facilities that you're providing? Okay, so that could be, if it's a family resource center, for example, it could be rental of space. You could be renting out meeting rooms. You could be renting out, computer training rooms to the local education training board. A lot of community volunteer organizations now that the facilities are looking at, can we put in some office space near for remote workers and have it a remote working hub? Maybe some hot desk space that we can put in. There's ways of utilizing the space to generate revenue. We do work with a GA club here in Kerry, and they've got a large indoor hall, and they've also like larger kind of meeting rooms and things like that, and they have a gym as well. And what they did was they leased the gym to a local personal trainer who runs the gym then for them, and she covers the insurance costs. She deals with all the membership fees because it's her gym. She's just leasing it, so they've got a guaranteed rental income coming in for their gym without all the headaches that go along with running the gym. They've converted their large meeting space into a preschool, and that's been rented out to preschool operators. So she rents out the preschool, they get guaranteed rental income from that. In the evenings when the preschool's not operating, they would use that room for meetings. They rent out their hall for use during the day when it's not being used by the club. So there's different ways they're bringing in revenue. Some organizations then would rent, say, on an hourly basis for meetings, whatever it might be. Some groups are doing childcare facilities within their buildings, so they have childcare fees. Some are operating daycare services, doing daycare fees. Some would put in, say, maybe training rooms, so they're renting out training rooms to likes of myself who are doing private training, or to likes of Education Training Board, where they're providing training space for DTB. I know Milton FC there in Cork, they use their clubhouse facilities. They've got a number of rooms there that they rent out for training purposes to CCAD, the local development company, and they're getting rental income coming in from that. So again, they're looking at what space is not being used during the day or at certain times of the week, and they're using then that space, they're renting that space then when it's not required for their own club. Some groups then will do things like secretarial services. Some groups we work with in areas where there's maybe tourist areas, they would provide information services like, say, tourist information offices. Some groups are doing meals for local people, and Meals on Wheels services. And then what's not on the list there and what's happening more recently is organizations set up like, say, community cafes and community shops within their centres as well. So they're looking at kind of social enterprise type model where they're operating actual businesses from their facilities. Again, things like laundry services. It's in this really, you can do pretty much whatever you want to do that's relevant to your local area. So again, we would have worked with a group that's a resource centre near the coastline here in North Kerry, and they put in, they have a laundry service there. So they'll do laundry for the local holiday homes during the summer season. For anyone staying in camper vans, they do laundry service for them. They're now looking to put in the air facilities for electricity and fresh water and wastewater services for camper vans and motorhomes as well. And they have the space for it. The investment isn't that huge, but they'll get a guaranteed income out of it. Just seasonal, but it'll still be an income for the season. The key thing with any traded income that you'll be bringing in is that the fees have to be affordable. So like a childcare facility, for example, would have a kind of a schedule of fees depending on the capacity of the parents to pay. So they would have a sliding scale of fees. Again, we would work with a lot of Meals on Wheels groups who would also have a daycare facility where the meals are being provided either at a very affordable price or for free to people who can't afford the meal. And then they would also have that facility open to the general public that will come in and pay the same price that you pay in a pub or a local cafe. And the fee that they're paying for their food subsidizes then the meals for people who can't afford it. So it's a very good social enterprise model where you have fee structures where people who can afford to pay more than those who can't afford, and they subsidize the ones who can't afford. And it's a really good system that works very, very well in a lot of different organizations. So again, with trade income, you're not out there trying to, as a commercial organization, trying to maximize your profit. But as I said earlier on, you are trying to make some profit so you can actually have a reserve build up. As I said, pricing structures can vary. There's nothing wrong with you having different prices for different groups. So we might be renting a community room in a resource centre in, let's say, Listowel or in Abbeyfeale or in somewhere in Cork, and we're paying maybe 65 euros an hour, whereas a local group might be using that same room the next night for free. And the 65 euros I'm paying is subsidizing the free use for the other group. If you have space, so if you're looking at, a building, again, look at the allocation of the space, make sure that it's planned so you can optimize the amount of rent you can get from it, so that every part of that property can be utilized and potentially generate revenue for you. So again, we would deal with, we've that one group who've got a community cafe, and the community cafe also doubles up as a meeting space at nighttime. So the layout of the cafe lends itself to be just basically very easily be configured at 6 o'clock when the cafe closes. It can be turned into a meeting room or a training room, or it can be used for, let's say, as a gallery. So the wall space uses gallery. Local artists might display, just do a gallery exhibition there. There might be teas and coffees, or might be for an open event. But the key thing is that space being utilized constantly. There's never downtime there. It's always generating some sort of revenue. Again, if you're dealing with groups who are using the facility, make sure you're talking to them and say, look, we're going to have to charge you some rent here. When you're looking at applying for a grant for your own project, make sure you include a rental cost, so then the rental fees come to us. So for example, we do a lot of work years ago with rural transport companies in Kerry, Cork and Limerick. And they had a lot of problems because there was schools coming to them, youth clubs coming to them, sports organizations, active retire groups coming to them and saying, look, you're a subsidized community transport company. You should be providing transport for free to us because you're subsidized, you're getting grant aid. But of course, they weren't getting enough grant aid. They had to charge a fee. So what we did was we went out and said to the groups who were needing this transport that they would apply for transport costs within their budget. So for example, a youth club would be looking for, say, maybe funding for their programs for the year, whatever activities we're going to run for the year. They were looking for funding from that through the various different sources they were looking to get grant aid from. And we got them to include transport costs within their budget. Okay, so now they had a transport cost. That transport budget that they got would now go to the transport company. Or if they get rental budget, that rental budget would go to the local community hall or community centre or whatever. So now they were getting grant aid indirectly through groups that work with locally. And that's something that a lot of groups don't do. If you sit down and work with your local groups, they can actually probably avail of grants you can't avail of that would indirectly go to yourselves. Okay. Again, we would work with an active retire group who got funding for through Go for Life program, but they didn't have a premises of their own. But they got funding through Go for Life for equipment. I think it was bowling equipment and some other equipment that went to a local community gym. Okay, the local community gym got to use that equipment themselves as well because it was based in their premises. But in turn, then the local community gym weren't charging them any rental for use of their premises. So they got basically free rent for the year because they made this equipment available that they got 100% grant aid for to the local community gym. So there's ways of groups working together at a local level as well. So again, we would do a lot of work with sports facilities where you got multi-use sports facilities where instead of having every club looking for their own space, that you'd have maybe a community facility where there's a number of clubs availing of that space. So they work in partnerships. We've done some work here outside of in a village outside of Tralee, where the community council secured land from the local authority, and they've developed, they've completed their 4G full-size soccer pitch. They've completed their full-size sand-based grass pitch for GA. They're in the process of looking at 100-meter running track, and they're in the process of getting planning for an indoor sports facility. And that facility will be used by the hurling club, the football club, the soccer club, the athletics club, community games, and the national school, all available in the one multi-purpose facility. During the day when it's not being used by the clubs or not being used by the school, or in some evenings during the week when it's not been used, or maybe sometimes over the weekend it's not been used, it's rented out then on a commercial basis to other clubs that don't have their own space. So it's a very good example of a multi-purpose, multi-facility, multi-use space that's benefiting many, many clubs. Each of those clubs can raise their own money and fundraise to cover some of the costs of that because they're using the space. Okay, so a maximized amount of funding at local level that they're also getting in. So next thing we look at would be fundraising, and the fundraising is, look, it could be anything. You could do anything you want to raise money. You know, there's some, you know, since I started working in the sector back in 1997, you know, things have got really creative since in terms of the types of fundraisers people are doing. And the reason being is that there's so much competition out there now for funds for people's money, that you have to do something that's a bit more different, a bit more quirky, or certainly with a lot more of an attractive prize. So, you know, there's currently 3 houses up up in a raffle in Killarney at the moment. One for, I think there's one actually in Cork for a school in Cork, and then there's a Kerry County Board of a raffle and another group of raffle as well for houses in Killarney. You know, so it's €100 a ticket, so it's a lot of money, but you know, it's a very substantial prize at the end of it. That project I was talking about a minute ago in the village outside of Tralee, they raised €1 million by putting a house up for raffle in Killarney 2 years ago. They set a target of €1 million, and they achieved that target. The project is costing €4 million, so it's a small bit towards their overall target. If you are doing fundraising, key thing that we would say to every group we work with is look at the return for the effort that you're putting into it. Okay, a lot of organizations do kind of multiple fundraisers throughout the year, small events, maybe like a cake sale, backpacking in the local supermarket, maybe church gate collection, maybe a fashion show, maybe some sort of raffle, whatever it might be, and it brings in, you know, maybe a couple €100 or a couple €1,000, which is very, very good. But if you add up the amount of hours you put into all those small fundraisers, the effort that goes into it, there's not a huge return from that. So what a lot of organizations now are doing is looking at large fundraising events that might be a one-off event each year. And there's 2 reasons why that's a good thing to do. One is that there's only one event that you're looking at. Now, there's a lot of work goes into that one event, but it's not multiple events throughout the year that you're putting the work into. Secondly, if it's a one-off event each year, local people are aware of it. It becomes, you try to tie it into a social event as well, especially if it's a small parish you're in. You try and tie it into a social event. So it becomes like one of the social events of the year that comes up every year, and people are waiting for it. So it's like the, you know, your annual dinner dance or your annual golf classic or your annual community festival. So again, you're looking at, you know, once a year we do this big event. Everyone knows about it. The sponsors we're going to go after know about it. They know we're going to go after them once only. You're not going to be plaguing them 4 or 5 times a year looking for money for different events. We're going to go to them once a year. If it's going to be a bigger event, there's a bigger chance of getting in more larger sponsors and larger corporate sponsors because you get more value out of it. Okay, so if you're doing, say, a weekend-long festival or community event, like a barbecue, maybe music festival, maybe sports festival, you know, a range of different things, and there's going to be a bit of publicity around that and a bit of promotion around it, and it's a kind of a large event once every year. Sponsors are more interested in those things than getting involved in a small local fundraiser. That's not really going to get them much attention or get them much value from their spend. So not going to be much money towards it. So the large fundraising events that we've been involved in this year, both directly with my own club that I'm involved with here in Kerry and other projects we've been involved with, the average at the moment, based on say the 3 or 4 that we've been involved with, either directly or indirectly, have generated in terms of profit between 25 and 35,000 euros in profit. That's after the professional fundraising companies who run these events have been paid. Okay, so there's you know, there's substantial money to be raised through these. You know, or my local school or my past secondary school that I used to attend, they managed to raise, I think it was 48,000 euros through a fundraiser, you know, the Cube fundraising event. They raised 48,000 euros. Now, there was a lot of work went into that, but that's a lot of money to raise in a fundraiser. That's a lot of backpacking to do, you know, get the equivalent to that. Sometimes you might want to do small events throughout the year, just basically kind of as a promotional tool for yourselves and to, you know, to let people know you're still there and as part of kind of informing people. So it might be more of a promotional activity just to kind of keep your name out there more so than an opportunity to make any money. But like doing cake sales isn't going to generate anything near you know, a large fundraiser. So just bear in mind, even though there's an awful lot of work involved in these large ones, if you add up the amount of time going into them, the same amount of time probably goes into the smaller ones that will bring in a fraction of the overall money. A key thing that you need to look at, you know, we should have been looking at the last 2 years when fundraising kind of took a nosedive in terms of physical fundraising, was online fundraising. And it's been something we've been talking about for many years, you know, that every organization should be looking at how we can get our fundraising online. The main reason why you would look at pushing for an online fundraising campaign or an ongoing fundraising campaign online is you can target an awful lot more people. If you do a local event in your local town, village, parish, wherever, okay, you're going to be limited to the amount of people that live there and are going to go to that event. So if you're doing a church day collection, you're limited to the amount of people that are going to go to that church on that particular Sunday. So you're very limited, you know, very, very limited. If you have an online fundraiser, you can target anyone you want to target. So think about all the people who left the parish, you know, 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, that have still a connection to the parish, and they're online, they're looking at the online newspapers, they're on the WhatsApp groups, they're back home and on their phone and on FaceTime with their family back home. They want to get involved, okay, but they can't if they're not here. If it's a fundraiser at a local level, they can if it's an online donation, they're sought. You'll also find that they're part of different WhatsApp networks as well. So they'll pass it on to their friends in terms of a very good campaign locally for the football pitch or football club we played for are doing a fundraiser. They're trying to develop their new pitch. If we all play there, let's get involved. Let's help them out, even though we're not there. Okay, you can target those people because now you're online. A lot of areas, if you've got tourism in your area, tap into that. Tap into visitors coming to your area. Set up a Friends of campaign for every tourist that comes in. If they donate, you know, €5 or $5 or wherever they're coming from, they get something in return for that. That might be access to an annual calendar, or might be access to an online newsletter. Some cases access to a live webcam or whatever it is that they can actually, but they feel they're part of the community that they visit. You know, if you got, we did this campaign years ago with a tourist area, and they didn't actually take up on the offer, which was crazy, but they reckoned that about 300,000 people a year going through their town. And we said, if you want to get 10% of those 300,000 to sign up to this online Friends of campaign, you'll be generating substantial money every year with very little work involved in it. Very little work, because most people will, if it's only $5 a year, they just basically resubscribe. They'll have an automatic subscription every year. And they didn't do it. I was like, I can never figure out why they didn't do it, because in a lot of cases, you know, people visiting the local community, if they're getting value for money, if they're getting to like what they see and they like the community they're in, they kind of want to be part of it. If they're from the community, they definitely want to be part of it. So again, it just gives you wider access to a lot more people than just your local community. If you have a charity or an organization, get a website, get your own website. You can do it through third-party websites, but it's a lot better if you have your own website where people can actually go on your site and donate to you directly. They can also get updates in terms of what the project is about, what's happening with the project, you know, where it's at, how it's progressing. You can update them and keep them informed of it. If anyone gives you money, whether it be a company, whether it be a grant agency, whether it be government department, whether it be a sponsor, whether it be a local person, you've got to keep them updated and informed about the project, how it's progressing, how that they were part of that, because then if you're looking for more money off them to finish the project, they're more inclined to actually give more the next time, rather than take the money, thanks very much, they never hear from you again until you look for more money off them. Always engage with them, keep them up to date what's happening. Okay, you can do that in different ways, but doing it through a website is a very great way of doing it. A lot of groups would say maybe do timelines of where they're at with a construction project. They might show images of, let's say, the field being dug up, field being seeded, being drained, the building underway, the foundations going down. People they don't have to look at it, but they want to see where the money's going to. You can use third-party funding sites, fundraising sites like GoFundMe. A lot of people would use these because it's very, very quick. It's very easy. You pay a transaction on the money that's donated, but it's a very quick and easy way of getting the fundraising campaign going. The problem there is that the positives are that people trust the sites because they're well known. But the problem is that you can't give them much more information about your project. They can't go in to see about you, what you do, who you're supporting, what the impact will be. They can't see images of the project. They can't see anything really. So they got to go back to your website to find that. So if they go back to your website, why not have them donating on your site and all the money goes directly to you, as opposed to paying commissions on this. But yeah, a lot of people will do this. They'll go straight to third-party fundraisers, and nothing wrong with it. But I would rather people use their own sites. iDonate's another one that you might be familiar with. Again, third-party fundraising site. This is Focus Ireland. You can see now what they have done. They have their own website, and they have different options. You can donate, you can buy Christmas cards, you can get involved in events, you can do corporate fundraising, they've got information about tax efficient giving, where there's refunds on it on the donations provided. If you want to leave a legacy in your will, again, you can do all these options. So they're giving you options on their page as how you can get involved. Okay, but you're on their page, you're finding out a bit about them. You could about us, different things you want to find out about it. A lot of people now are using video, so they're getting video kind of promotional videos done for their large projects, showing, like, say, 3D images of what the project would look like, doing kind of overviews of the project, giving some information about it, maybe some narrative on it as well, and encouraging people to get involved and see where their money is going to go to. So with fundraising, just come back to it, and we will be going through fundraising in a lot more detail in the fundraising workshop, but it is an area that we're all familiar with, either on the giving side of it or the ones actually looking for money side of it, and I've been on both sides. It can be very, it can be very frustrating, it can be very difficult, it can take an awful lot of time, but again, I go back to the word planning. If you plan it properly, if you've got enough people around you to assist with the fundraising campaign, I'm not going to say it makes it easy, but it makes it easier, and you can maximize the amount of money you can get out of it. Where we find that there's problems with organizations raising money and through fundraising is that they just don't have enough bodies around to assist with there's about 3 or 4 people that are committed to it. The others say, yeah, I'll get involved, I'll help out, and they never do. Or they commit to selling tickets for something, they never do. And then last minute there's panic in terms of how we're going to do it. We've a kind of a thing we talk about, which is the power of 10. And we say, okay, if you can identify 10 people on your committee or 10 people involved in your group or your club that are committed, not just 10 random people who are being dragged in to get involved, 10 people who are going to commit to this process. If they find 10 people each that they can sell tickets to, or they can go out and get to donate, that's 100 people now you got straight away, and that means that the work is split out. So it's not like one person trying to find 100 people, it's like 10 people trying to find 10 people. And 10 people will find 10 people. We all know 10 people that will give something if we ask them, okay? And it just means that and then you could double that. You can go to 20 people if you want to, but it's all, 20 people find 10 people, or 30 people to find 10 people. And that's how you generate it. So when you look at a fundraiser and, the 10 people, 4 or 5 people in the committee are asked to sell all these tickets and go around and try to sell them, it becomes difficult because you're thinking, I'm never going to sell all these tickets. And now it comes to the deadline and you half the tickets you're going to sell aren't sold, and you don't raise the money you want to raise. We just got a text there just literally today from our local GA club that our sons play with, and they're doing a fundraiser, Night of the Dogs fundraiser in June for the Juvenile Academy to raise money. They've asked all the parents of the academy members to basically take 5 tickets and sell 5 tickets to the race night. And that's possible because there's only 5 tickets. Some parents won't do it, but if 80% of the parents do, and there's probably 140 kids, so that's 140 kids by, I'd say, at least one parent. That's 140 parents, with 5 tickets. That's 500, whatever it is. I'm not even trying to do that in my head, but that's a lot of tickets being sold. But it's only 5 I have to sell. I'm not trying to sell 500 tickets. I'm trying to sell 5 tickets. So again, you're trying to find out what's the best way to do it. Then looking at sponsorship, and again, this is an area that I suppose is kind of close to my heart because I have a company. I have a private company. We get asked a lot to sponsor things because we're involved in them, which we do because we're involved in them. We sponsor, our local club because I'm involved with it. They do great work with the kids. They provide fantastic facilities, and they're volunteering all their time and a lot of hours into it. So I have no problem in sponsoring jerseys, things like that. But the problem with a lot of organizations, they don't tap into sponsorship as much as they should do. It is probably the most underutilized form of raising funds in Ireland, without doubt. If you go to the States, the UK, anywhere else around the world, sponsorship is a big part of how they raise money. Grant aid isn't as it's not the go-to option in a lot of those countries. In Ireland, I suppose historically we were always kind of looking for grants for this, that, and the other, and looking to be subsidized for this, that, and the other. And it's kind of got into a culture that we kind of what's the word? I suppose we feel that we're entitled to grant aid for projects, and we're not. We shouldn't be thinking that way. If your grant's available, brilliant, fantastic. It's bonus. But we need to look at the other elements of it. And there's companies out there making lots of money. There's companies out there with a corporate social responsibility remit, that should be giving something back to the community or want to give something back to the community. And very often they're looking for projects to get involved in. Okay, the problem is what we do in most cases is that we cold call, we knock on doors, send letters, send emails saying, please get involved in our project, help us sponsor it. And that's not going to get us anywhere. You know, you're not going to get, you know, you might get lucky, you might get a company to give you something, but chances are you're going to get nothing, because why would they? They're inundated with people calling them every day or every week for money off them for this, that, and the other. So the key thing what we do is identify companies that are targeting the same customers that are using your services. So if you're providing services for older people, look at the companies out there that have their customers are older people. If you're targeting young people in terms of providing service for young people, look at the companies out there that are targeting young people or their parents. Okay, so our soccer club was at the academy jerseys were sponsored by a company called the Palladium, and the Palladium was an indoor play center for kids based in Tralee. Okay, made perfect sense for them to sponsor the academy players who range between 6 and 9 years of age, because that was their target market going to the Palladium. Okay, up on the social media, thank you to the Palladium for sponsoring jerseys this year. If you're looking to have a birthday party, great place to go for. They got business out of it. They got goodwill out of it, because people said, well, fair play, they're covering the cost of jerseys. That means I don't have to pay a jersey. We'll have a birthday party there this year because of this. They also had, 100 odd kids running around on Saturday morning with the Palladium branded across their jersey. So it made sense. Now we wouldn't entertain McDonald's doing it, because we would have issues with that. No, not since McDonald's, Burger King, or any chip or any takeaway, or anyone selling bad food or junk food or sugar-laden drinks, because that's not the message you're trying to get across to our kids that are playing football and playing soccer and playing sport. So we would have certain limits in terms of where we're going to get in there. But you will go after companies that's going to be relevant to them to get involved. Okay, a lot of companies locally, because they're local companies, will get involved. They might be involved in the organization, they might be involved in the club, their kids might be involved in the club. So when we did our fundraiser for our AstroTurf pitch, which is going to cost $500,000 for our soccer club in Tralee, we identified all the parents that were involved in the club that had their own business. I went to them and said, okay, you got your own business. Can you sponsor, give a sponsor for a golf classic? Yeah, no problem. Can you sponsor our fundraiser for a trip to Florida? Yeah, no problem. Can you sponsor or if you give us €500, we put a sign up on a new pitch and you've got your signage there. They said, no problem. And then we said, can you do for 3 years? And sign up for a 3-year deal, give us €500 a year for 3 years. And they said, no problem. Why did they say no problem? Because 2 reasons. One, we're providing services for their kids. Some of 3 or 4 kids playing with the club. Secondly, they could write that money off as a marketing expense, because it was sponsorship, so it's a marketing expense. So if they gave €500 to the local club, they could put that €500 down as an expense, which means that they reduce their net income by €500, which would in turn reduce their tax liability. But mostly they want to get involved. And then what happened was the parents who had companies who didn't get involved saw the other parents get involved with their companies, said we better get involved here as well, or it won't look too good, because they know we didn't get involved. So we didn't do that deliberately. We didn't play them off each other, but they knew themselves, look, because we put up in social media, thank you very much to Joe Blogs Limited for sponsoring. And the next day there was another company sponsoring, the next day, and eventually nearly all the parents who had their own businesses and companies or were involved in companies at senior level got involved in sponsoring. So we generated in fundraising between a golf classic and between our raffle we did and our pre-sale of advertising boarding, we've generated €85,000 in cash towards that project in the space of 10 months, because it was very, very targeted, very, very targeted. That's the key thing. Now you might say, okay, but that's Tralee and is a larger population. Doesn't matter. It's about targeting. We didn't go after the population of Tralee. We went after probably 50, 60 people is all we went after. But they were involved already in the club. We weren't cold calling them, knocking on the door saying we get involved. What we also did was, and this is something that's really important with sponsorship, is you're using that one key person that's networked with other organizations to be your main contact. So when Kerry County Board, Kerry GA did their international fundraiser a number of years ago in the UK and in the States, they raised $1 million in America because they went through one lead company over there that was from Kerry, originally from Kerry, the owner of the business in construction sector, who got onto all these suppliers, all the builders, providers, all the architects, engineers who were getting lots of money every year from this company. He said, you know, we've got the guys coming over here raising money for back home in Ireland. We're doing a dinner dance. It's $10,000 a table for the dinner dance for each table. So €1,000 a head for 10 people at a table. We signed you up for 2 tables. They couldn't say no because we were getting millions of dollars every year in services from this company. So that's what they used. They targeted one person who was networked that would bring in the other companies around them. Okay. And that's how they did it. And, you know, there's no secret that that's how the large fundraising is done. They get champions, as they would call them, who will be well networked, who will have a lot of contacts, who will be able to convince their network that they should get involved in this project. Okay. But you have to be able to give them the ammunition. You have to be able to tell them this is what the impact will be of this project. It's not going to give money for anything. They want to give money something that they can get benefit from. Okay, so the key thing with the county board and GA was about we were kind of using the angle, because we did a marketing on it for them, that anyone that would get involved would be part of the legacy of Kerry GA. That was the legacy thing we were going with. We were targeting diaspora, people who left Ireland many years ago from the county, who were passionate about the county, passionate about Ireland, passionate about the GA, and wanted to give something back and get involved in it. That's what we targeted. We didn't do it randomly. We targeted people that would have an interest in it. So we worked through the GA networks over there as they existed. Look at the activities that will get most coverage. So again, there's not really much point in me giving, sponsorship to something that I'm not going to get any exposure for, right? So if a group comes to me and says, Tom, can you sponsor our race card for us or sponsor a jersey for us? I'll say, yeah, possibly, but what's the impact for me really out of it? If they say, well, okay, we're doing a big social media campaign, your brand will be all over it. We get, X amount of visitors per month on our website, X amount of visitors every day on our social media. We're in the paper a lot for the good reasons. We're on radio. Your brand will be associated with all that. We put a big sign on the gate, whatever it might be. So, again, some companies don't want any coverage at all. They don't want any exposure, just want to give silent funds. And here you go, don't tell anyone I gave it to you. But others want their branding out of it. Okay. So when I was involved in Ring of Kerry cycle on the commercial side, the likes of Skoda got involved, and Skoda provided us with something like 15 cars for the day to provide support vehicles. But when I was involved, there was 13,000 people cycling in the Ring of Kerry. Those 13,000 people saw Skoda vehicles everywhere. Does it mean they went off and bought Skoda vehicles? No, but there was brand recognition. Lidl got involved. SuperValu got involved after Lidl. Nature Valley got involved. Then Nature Valley went around and it was raining one of the cycles, and they went around and put seat covers over everyone's bike with Nature Valley branding on it. So it's all about brand exposure from them. But we could say to them, 13,000 cyclists, we're going to see the brand. So again, that's what you're trying to say. Okay, what's the coverage? What's the benefits to the company? Again, the benefits to them is from a marketing point of view, they're going to get exposure, or it might purely be that they want to give something back to the community. So you're helping them meet their corporate social responsibility objectives. The key thing then is to identify key people within those organizations to champion your project. Don't cold call. Ask yourself the question, is anyone on our committee involved in this company? Anyone we know personally involved in the company at a senior level that can get us in front of the decision makers, or encourage or force in some cases someone to actually sponsor this project? And there's always going to be someone, no companies that are working at a senior level or owning a company that will get involved because they're involved anyway. If you're marketing your organization, if you're not marketing your organization, there's no point in going near a corporate look for sponsorship because they're not going to get any exposure. So if you're saying, look, we promote what we do and we promote the people we support, we're in the papers a lot, we're constantly doing things, we've got a huge online presence, we get a lot of coverage, PR coverage with local press, with local journalists. They're always giving us something in the papers, maybe helping us out with an article or an editorial or advertising our campaigns or our festivals, whatever it might be. We've got a person looking after digital marketing, and we're on all the various platforms. That gives them, that says then they're going to get more exposure for their brand or for their involvement, because you're going to be promoting them more. Things like this, then, if you're trying to promote your project. So this is an example of this school. that you're looking at there in the background, it was the red brick building, or the sandstone building was the school I went to in secondary school. The new building that's next to it is the modern building, was finished about maybe 6-7 years ago. And this was, they currently have on site the pitch that we're looking at now in a 3D format. When this was being done, that was literally a large car park, just a gravel surface car park. And they were going out to trying to fundraise for an AstroTurf pitch, which is what we're looking at here in front of us. The problem is no one had an idea where the pitch was going to go, what it would look like, how big it would be. Some people didn't have a clue what an AstroTurf pitch was. So they were finding it hard to fundraise. So we got our architect to come up with a 3D image like this, which was going to show what the pitch would look like when it was completed. And we got this up on an 8-foot by 8-foot board and put it at the entrance to the gate, of the school gate. Now, the entrance to the school is located on a very busy road in Tralee. Everyone going past it could see this is what we're trying to achieve here. A lot of people going past have been in school there, or their parents have been in school there, or in some cases their grandparents have been in school there, and they want to get involved. And all of a sudden they started getting inquiries about, how can we help fundraise to get this pitch put into our school to be school there. So before that, no one knew what it was because no one could see what it was. So it's very important to actually show someone what the finished product is going to look like. You can use images, you can use, 3D video, animation video, whatever it might be, or just have someone talking about it. But it's really important to show what it's going to be at the end of it, because otherwise people can't visualize what they're going to put the money towards. Okay, so if you've got a greenfield site, and ask people to sponsor it and give you money towards it, and all you can see when they go past is a field with cattle grazing on it, they're not going to give you money. Whereas you can see a billboard with what it's going to look like when it's completed and what your money will achieve, they will support it and will get involved in it. Okay, so you have to be able to tell people the story, the narrative, why we're doing this, what's going to be the result of this. And again, this costs them like €300 to do this poster. So it's not like crazy expensive. And this was a project that managed to raise €48,000 through their fundraiser at the end of it. So again, but they were struggling because no one had a clue what they're actually trying to do, because they couldn't see what it was going to do or what it was going to be. This is one we did for the county board. Again, we put together a business development plan for large sponsors. So if they were giving a lot of money towards the project, we had to show them something professional, well presented, given a full breakdown of the costs, given the rationale behind it, who was behind it, the structures behind it, how the money would be managed, and how the project would be developed. So we put together a business development plan that was presented to serious players in corporates in the States and in the UK to back it up. And then this is backed up then by video and backed up by other promotional material on the night. But again, as I said, they raised over $1 million in the States, and they raised a fraction of that in the UK, but they still raised close on 1.4 million euros in total. But they invested in our services, graphic designers, videographers, because they had to be able to go there with a very professional pitch to those companies, because that's what these companies were expecting. Ring and Kerry Charge Cycle, again, the first year we were involved, we put together all these brochures, which was actually probably a waste of time, because most companies actually approached us saying they wanted to get involved in it because it was the largest fundraising cycle in the country, probably still is. It's come back a lot now. Obviously, it wasn't up this year's first year back since the pandemic, but it was at its peak. It was getting 13,000-14,000 cyclists. Companies were approaching us; they wanted to get involved in it. They wanted to be involved in Ring and Kerry because it was people from all over Ireland and abroad were coming to the cycle every July to cycle on it. So all these brochures we put together and a video were fantastic, but they weren't really needed at the end of the day in terms of the cycle was getting so much exposure, the companies wanted to get involved. Okay, so in terms of sponsorship and fundraising, so it's going to just again stop the share for a second to see if you have any questions on that element of it, because it's an area I suppose people are that are looking at the various different types of funding and sponsorship. It's important that I suppose you again, like your grant aid and like everything else, you plan for it. And what we would recommend there is that you would put together like a database of key people that you can go after and target, especially on the sponsorship side of it. But on the fundraising side, that you put a very, very strong fundraising committee, not a committee that's going to just meet and talk about fundraising, that are going to go out there and actually fundraise. Because there's enough people that love planning the whole thing and talking about it and putting a plan in place, but when you ask them to go out and sell something and sell tickets, they're not too pushed about doing it. So it's really important that you kind of organize that. Have any comments in terms of maybe sponsorship or fundraising where you've come into problems with the past, but or maybe some ideas that you have yourselves that are campaigns you've done that were successful?
I put one up on the chat, and I was thinking the Darkness into Light campaign is possibly the one that's scored the best. I believe they've raised something like 29 million so far, and it's an excellent slogan, bearing in mind mental health. To just work out the slogan, and it's appealed to so many, and it's now gone, I think, continental, if not international. And okay, they've missed a year or two because of the pandemic, but it seems to be ongoing and with great support. I think it's an absolutely brilliant campaign.
It is, and it's good. It's a very good example, Gavin. And the reason why it's very successful as well is because it's a community campaign, because everyone get involved in it. It doesn't matter, what age you are. It doesn't matter if you've got loads of money or no money. You can get involved in it. So it's community. Like I'm always constant to people. You need to look at your community events, like your festivals, or get people involved at a community level. And the great thing about Darkness into Light is that it is the community getting involved. As you see all the people walking, and clubs get involved, schools get involved, companies get involved. So it's a big kind of community type of campaign. The one we normally put up was the Ice Bucket Challenge. Remember the Ice Bucket Challenge a couple of years ago? Remember that one? Where people were throwing buckets of ice over people's heads, and that was a crazy, that was crazy successful because people were just doing it. Most people didn't realize it was even a fundraiser, but they were doing it as a fundraiser. And the other one was the Shave or Die campaign that was run by the Irish Cancer Society with Today FM. Again, hugely popular, hugely successful, but they tapped into celebrities. So a lot of celebrities were getting involved in this project, and the celebrities were the kind of champion of it. What I like about Darkness into Light, even though there is celebrities involved, it's community, it's the general public, it's people, regular people, not focused on celebrities and people that are well known. It's everyone in the community getting involved in it. But yeah, it's a very good example of how a campaign can, just take off and be an annual thing. So everyone becomes aware it happens every year and becomes this annual event that people are looking forward to or getting ready for.
Yeah. Sorry. No,
Hi, Anya.
I was written off because I am budgets in the scan at 3 o'clock. So I kind of wrote it off my.
Okay,
Anne O'Brien, you need to mute yourself.
Sorry, I'm asking a question. Okay. Any other campaigns you've been involved with that have been successful or areas that you feel we're struggling big time here with fundraising, or we're struggling to get people involved?
Sorry, just one very quick sort of side question. I know you discouraged maybe going to GoFundMe or I Donate, but I was just wondering what percentage do these companies look for if you ask them to sponsor you?
Yeah, it varies. I have it actually just here in another slide. Just give me 2 seconds here, and I'll find it for you exactly.
No, if it's a problem, don't worry. But
no, it says I have it actually here on another slide. Okay, so I Donate, they charge, Just Giving charges 1.9% transaction fee and then a 20 cent per donation after that. GoFundMe charge 2.9% transaction fee and 30 cents per donation. So, can be, it's not huge money, but it's still, it's still giving a percentage over. Then there's one, what's it called? Is it Zero Matters? And that's through Altruism Ireland, and they charge 0%. Now, I'm not familiar. I know of them, but I'm not familiar with any organizations that use them. And then your text campaigns, then the Like Charity, so the text donate campaigns, again they charge I think it's a 20 cent fees on donations. Again, depends on the kind of they have a scale or kind of a pricing scale. So yeah, they're all in around probably one kind of between 1.9 and 3%, some are a bit higher,
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions on the fundraising sponsorship side before we move on to the next part?
Tom, can I just go back to what you mentioned earlier about tourists coming through a town and they were friends of the town, and you mentioned the calendar. Is there any other way that they could be friends of a town? As in, how does that work?
So, but it's again just trying to be kind of creative around it. Like, so what we recommend, and I'm not going to name the town that didn't do it, by the way, just in case you might be familiar with the town. It's not in Cork, it's in Limerick, and it's not in Kerry either. So what we suggested there was a couple of things we said we do. So it was going to be a campaign that we would run through the guest houses and B&Bs and the pubs and the hotels they were staying in or going to. So, and it wasn't kind of in your face type of, please support us type thing. It was more around, friends of. So they'd be getting kind of familiar with this Friends of campaign, and they would question what it was all about. And the key thing was to renovate an old building in a town that was a very, very important heritage building in a town. And that was the campaign, was for that. But we said that if you do for one-off event, why not kind of constantly keep it going every year? So we looked at a couple things. One was we were going to put a webcam on the building in question, which kind of gave a panoramic view of the main street of the town, and they could log into that whenever they wanted to. Now we might say, well, why would they want to log in? Sometimes if they go back to, like, I know I've got a lot of family in the States, and they go back to the States to want to show their colleagues at work where they were on holidays and all this kind of stuff, right? So it's a small minor thing, but it's important to some of the visitors. They were going to get an annual, a monthly update, like a monthly newsletter in terms of would be emailed to them. So a digital newsletter would be to be put on the mailing list that everyone got. They would get an annual calendar, so a Christmas calendar plus a Christmas card from the group.
Okay. Yeah.
But also we didn't suggest, and this is kind of where they got they didn't like it, was that they'd actually get a certificate, like a, not a kind of freedom of the city type certificate, but a certificate saying they were an honorary member of that town. Now it kind of was kind of quirky and kind of maybe, I don't know, some people thought it was ridiculous. Right? I thought it was kind of, I lived in the States for a number of years, and I could visualize people having this thing and framed in their offices, for example, or in their pub, if they own a pub in New York or in Boston or wherever,
or like they could adopt a street or adopt a signpost.
Absolutely brilliant idea. Like they're like they get the street named after them, but you could have 400 people with the street named after them.
Yeah.
And be like adopt a sheep in the guy down in Kinmare. Probably 100 people own the same sheep. But it's just it could be fun too. A bit of give him a t-shirt, like on a friend or whatever. €5 to print a t-shirt. It's not. The point I was trying to make to them was that you weren't asking like for €100, kind of like tax or anything like that. It was like small, €5-10, and they could just basically sign up, pay online, and it'd be automatically taken from their account every year with the permission. But like if you get like there's 1.2 million tourists coming through Kerry every year, for example, it's a lot of tourists. If you're targeting 10% of that's what, 100,000 people.
We should all move to Kerry, I think.
There's a lot of people going through Cork as well. I just don't have the facts on Cork at the moment at hand. But then this again, it's just thinking outside the box, really.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
And it's about looking at if the way I look at it is that you can have 10 people giving you €100 each, or you can have 100 people give you €10 each.
Yeah.
In the more if someone can't, so like some people say I can't afford to give €200 toward a donation. But like if you ask them for €20 over 10 months, that's manageable,
Yeah, so, thank you.
Yep. So it's just being creative and you don't have to reinvent the wheel either as well. Like look at other Google successful campaigns, successful fundraisers, successful sponsorship campaigns. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be in Ireland, it could be in anywhere in the world. Copy the model. You can't copy if they've got a trademarked name for that event or whatever, you can't copy, but you can certainly copy the model in terms of that makes sense. I like the way they did that. We could try and do something similar here,
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I was going to go back to the screen share real quick because I'm just conscious of the time. Okay, so when you are looking at fundraising, and this is something that you should all be very, very aware of, okay? So if what you can basically do is you can go to revenue and see, can you get approved as a body for tax relief on donations, right? So basically there's tax relief on donations fund or scheme available through revenue, through the revenue commissioners. And basically what that is, that it's, if you're approved for that scheme, any donation you get from a PAYE worker, so someone that's employed paying PAYE tax, they have to give a minimum donation of 250 euros in any 1 year. Now, they can give more if they want to, but the minimum has to be 250 euros. Okay. When they give you 250 euros, you give them a form to complete, and that form is a revenue form with their name, with their details, with their PPS number. You hold on to that form, which is like a receipt, and you then submit that receipt or that form to revenue. Now, some people do it once a year, some people do it maybe once a quarter as they get a number of them in. Submit those forms to revenue, and then revenue will give you the taxes that have been paid on that 250 euros will be given back to you. No, there's no tax relief for the person who's donating the money. They get nothing out of it, only the fact they've donated money to a good cause. But you get a top up because you get refunded the tax that they've paid on that. Okay. So to give an example of how that works in terms of numbers. So for example, if the person's in a higher rate of tax, okay, and they give you 250 euros donation in any 1 year, you apply to revenue, you will get additional 174 euros that they paid tax on that 250 from revenue. So in reality, you're getting 424 euros of that donation. If they're on the standard rate of tax, which is about 20% or whatever it is now, they give 250 euros, you'll get a refund of 62.50 on top of that. So in reality, you're getting 312 euros from that person. Okay, so 250 from them directly, and then a refund on the tax they paid on it from revenue. Okay, so the form you need to complete when you're applying is a CHY3 form, and then there's a form then to be a certificate to be completed by the actual donor. So if they don't complete the form and give their PPS details, you won't be able to get the refund because revenue have to check their PPS. Now, some people are a bit kind of wary because they don't like dealing with revenue, so they don't want to give their details to you to pass on to revenue. But if they're pay-away workers and they're all above board in terms of their taxes, then there's nothing for them to worry about, pretty much, because it comes out, it's for pay-away workers, and it's coming out their tax they paid on their income tax on their salary anyway. So again, what we would suggest to organizations, rather than asking someone for 250 euros of a donation, you sign them up to a direct debit scheme. Okay, so they pay the 250 euros over 12 months. Then you go back to them and say, okay, next year when that 250 euros, that 12 months is up, do they want to renew it and start off again for the following year? Okay. Now, the reason why it's a good idea to get them to pay that by direct debit over a 12-month period is that it's less painful on them in terms of handing over 250 euros. They're paying out over 12 months. But secondly, if you're going, let's say, for a loan, a bank loan or a social bank loan towards a project, you can now show the bank, look, we've got money coming in every month from our donors by direct debit. Let's say you're getting 250 euros over 12 months, which is 12 by 12, is 20 euros 83 cents per month per person. Let's say if you get 100 people signed up to the scheme, that's bringing in 1,000 euros and 83 cents. Sorry, 1,083 euros every month. You go into the bank and say, look, we've got guaranteed income coming in here through our direct debit scheme of 2,000 euros a month. That's repayment capacity straight away. Now, the bank could say, well, what if they cancel the direct debit? Of course, yeah, they could. What if they don't sign up the following year? Of course, they could. But if I'm going in as a company looking for a bank loan, there's no guarantee that my customers won't be there next week or next year either. So there's always a bit of risk involved from the person giving you the money. But if you can show you got the capacity to raise money and fundraise on an ongoing basis through a direct debit scheme like this, that gives them more comfort in terms of giving you the loan, because they want that loan to be paid every month. If you go and say, oh yeah, we do 3 fundraisers a year, yeah, but that's not every month. We want to see where the money is coming in every single month. So we would be familiar with a couple of organizations and clubs who have done that. They would have gone after maybe, I think one group in particular, I think it was 350 people that they signed up to the 250 euros scheme. So they got in 20 odd euros per month from 350 people. That's 6,000 euros a month that's coming in. That's a lot of people to target, but they went out, as I said, around the power 10. They got a number of people within their group to target maybe 10, 20 people to sign up to this direct debit scheme. Now, it took a long time and it wasn't easy, but the money they generated out of it was phenomenal. It was huge. So again, it's just thinking about, can I get more money out of the person without them actually giving me more money? Yes, you can through the tax relief scheme. Can I make it more easier for them to give me a donation? Yes, I can, by allowing them to pay over 12 months as opposed to paying it up front. And if you go to a company, then just come back a second, if you go to a company like me, and you say to them, well, if you donate 500 euros, Tom, that's a marketing expense. We give you a receipt saying that O'Leary and Associates Training Consultancy kindly donated 500 euros towards our sponsoring or sponsorship towards our jerseys this year. I can give that to my accountant. My accountant will see that as a direct marketing expense for my company, and they will add it on to my expenses side, which reduces my tax liability. So the same way as me putting an ad in the paper and paying 500 euros for it, if I give 500 euros to the local club as sponsorship, I can write that off as a marketing expense. Okay, so you go to them and you make it easier for them to give you money. Okay, that's the key thing. So if you're a GA club, if you're a sports club, if you're a family resource center, if you're a Tidy Towns group, doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're going after a company, have an official receipt, which is stating that this company gave us sponsorship, and make sure you put in the word sponsorship of whatever it is for the year, and they can use that then as a receipt. The same way as get a receipt from the examiner or from wherever, that's an allowable marketing expense because of sponsorship, and sponsorship is a marketing tool that businesses would use. Again, just going to them and saying these things. If it's a sole trader locally, same thing, they can claim it as a marketing expense also. And if it's a PAYE worker, okay, they can't claim it because there's nothing to claim, but you can claim the relief if you've been approved for the tax relief on donations. Again, a lot of sports clubs would avail of that scheme. A lot of churches avail of it. A lot of schools avail of it. So debt finance. Now you're trying to avoid debt if you possibly can, and avoid loans if you possibly can. But the reality is, if you're developing any project of scale, you're going to have to, and you're looking for any grant, you're going to have to spend the money first, and then you draw down the grant. So I think as Anna was doing that's doing the GA pitch there, the AstroTurf pitch or the grass pitch. When you're going, say if you get sports capital funding, you have to first of all spend the money, and you draw down the grant. So you're going to have to some level of loans there, whether it be bridging loan or bridging loan and long-term loan. So it doesn't matter what organization you are, what capital funding you're looking at. If you get a grant aid, the money is only paid out retrospectively after the money is being spent by yourselves. So you got to show here's our invoices, here's our receipts, here's our bank statement, here's our letter from the accountant saying the money was spent in the way it should have been spent. Here's your insurance in some cases we'll look for as well, and then they'll pay out the grant. There could be a delay of maybe months, 2 months getting the grant drawn down. That's where you need some sort of maybe bridging finance from a bank. In a lot of other areas, you need to have maybe 20-30% funding towards the project. If it's a large scale project, you're not going to fundraise that level of money. There's going to be some sort of grant day there. Our club at the moment, we have a €500,000 project. We're going to borrow 300,000 euros, which is 25,000 euros a year for 15 years to pay it off. But we have to do it. We're going to get it from the bank. They're going to give it to us because we can show we can repay it every year. But it's a 300,000 euro loan we're taking out. So you got the commercial banks, Bank of Ireland, AIB, etc., that will give money to projects. Not a lot of times because they're not as safe as bet as maybe a lot of other loans would be. Credit unions are very much in this space. They're giving money out to community projects the whole time. There's also different types of bursaries and grants as well, depending on the credit union. Then you got your social banks, and the social banks in Ireland are Clan-Credo, they're headquartered out of Milton. They're in CCAD's offices in Milton, in Cork, and you got Community Finance Ireland, who would have regional officers working in the various different regions. Any bank, whether it be social bank is different than a commercial bank in that it only funds social projects, so not-for-profit projects. Their interest rates would be similar to the banks. The main advantage of a social bank is they don't look for any directors' guarantees on the loan, whereas a commercial bank will. They won't look for guarantees from the voluntary directors. They will look for security, but they won't look for guarantees from the directors. All the banks, whether it be social or commercial banks, will look for a business plan, showing what the projections are for a minimum of 3 years to show that there's repayment capacity for 3 years. Now, the repayment capacity for a not-for-profit organization is primarily your fundraising strategy. So if you're saying, oh yeah, we're going to pay off 15 grand a year of a loan, but you've shown no capacity to fundraise, they're not going to give you a loan because they won't trust you, they won't believe you. So you've got to show a good track record in raising money each year, whether it be through sponsors or through fundraisers. So for example, when we were putting in the business plan for the 300,000 euro loan for the football club we're involved with, we showed that we were going to repay the loan through rental of our existing AstroTurf pitch, which now will become available more often during the week. We would rent that out at whatever it was, 60, 70 euros per hour for people doing 5-a-side or whatever it might be. We were also showing that we would have a minimum of one fundraiser a year, which would bring in, you know, a minimum of 25,000 euros, which would cover the loan in its entirety. One fundraiser would cover the entire payments for the year. And we were doing a sponsorship deal, a 3-year sponsorship deal, which we were targeting 15,000 euros per year in sponsorship per year for 3 years, and then starting off again in 3 years' time. So we're showing them, outside of any other fundraising or outside of any other fees coming in, that with those 3 initiatives, we were bringing in probably 10,000 euros more than what the repayments were each year. Okay, so we were showing them not only the capacity to pay off the loan each year, we had the capacity to actually pay down the loan quicker than the 15 years. Okay, the main thing is that we show them separate projections for the pitch, not including projections for the club, because we kept the pitch project separate. We didn't want the club being subsidizing the pitch repayments. In other words, money for light, heat, insurance, bus fees, jerseys, referees fees, match fees, all this sort of stuff weren't included, because they were going to be covered separately by other fundraising. We were looking purely at money we were bringing in for this specific project. Okay, so when they asked the question, are you going to be subsidizing this project through other income from the club? We said, no, this is a standalone project, has to stand on its own feet. If it doesn't, we're not going to do it. They want to see details of the management structure. So if you're applying for a loan, whether it be a company or an individual or an organization, not-for-profit organization, they want to make sure the people that are involved have the capacity to get the project done in time and on budget. Okay, it's not about giving the organization money, it's giving the people within the organization the money. If the organization hasn't good governance structures in place, hasn't, you know, a good committee system in place, you know, a board, competent people running the organization, or at least on subcommittees or whatever it might be, they won't give you the funding. They will look at, the first thing to look at is who's involved, what's their experience, shows your committee structure, shows your governance, shows your policies and procedures. If none of those are in place, then it's unlikely you won't get money off them. Repayment capacity has to be there. You have to be able to show repayment capacity every month. And then they will look for security on the loan in terms of the property, if it's a property, but they will not, the social banks will not look for directors' guarantees, which is very important. If you're asked as director of a voluntary organization, or if you're a voluntary director of an organization, do not sign guarantee on any loan that organization is taking out, okay? Because they will then come after you personally for that repayment. Other sources of funds and non-financial support. So it's not about getting money donated, it's also about getting in-kind support donated to you as well. So lottery funding. So a lot of organizations have moved on to online lotteries because they couldn't go around to the pubs every Friday evening collecting money and selling lottery tickets. So they went on to an online lottery. There's a number of different websites and companies out there that will facilitate the online lotteries for you. You're probably familiar with some of them. Most of the set have gone online since COVID, and some are staying online because they're just trying to get more money. Again, because if you're doing a local lottery and you're relying on local people that are living locally, whether it be door to door, going around the pubs in the Friday evening, that's limiting you. Whereas if you're an online lottery, you can target those people that are moved away and living abroad that want to get involved, but don't have to be in the village on a Friday night, who can actually buy tickets online. Again, we're doing it through our club. It's a monthly direct debit. So you sign up to monthly direct debit, it comes out of your account every month, and then you get your numbers for that. There's various number of trusts and foundations out there. So JP McManus Foundation, Tomar Trust, or Tomar Trust, Ireland's funds. You know, they'll give money to specific causes primarily, or maybe causes within specific geographical areas within the county. They're very usually targeted. Normally they don't accept cold call applications. They normally will need to be, again, through networking, and they'll be approaching you rather than you approaching them. But it's again trying to find out who's involved. Is there any way of getting contacts? Do we know anyone that's involved in there? Can we get our foot in the door and get talking to them? Business to the community will match community groups with business people and with businesses as well. So again, interested to look what they do. And then the key thing, which is something that again people overlook, and if they're not overlooking it, they don't put a value on it, is non-financial donations. So things like, websites. I'm saying to you, get a website built. Go to local website company and say, look, we're not looking for money off you. We're looking for your time. Can you build us a website for free? In return, we'll promote you, we'll praise you, we'll thank you, and you will get work out of it, because there's people here that will need websites built that will give you the websites because of goodwill and want to get something back. Equipment, second-hand equipment is fine, absolutely fine. Again, I would have known enterprise centers who would have gone to companies and saying, look, if you're getting rid of any old furniture, office desks, filing cabinets, anything like that, we'll buy them off you, we take them off you. I know of one community center who got 450 chairs, I think it was, conference room chairs, because the hotel locally was upgrading, spent a lot of money on upgrading all their interior, replacing all their conference banqueting hall chairs, the ones you see in hotels. They were fine, they were a bit outdated, and this community group came in and took them all for the community center for free. Expertise, buy-in expertise. If you're involved in the capital project where there's building involved, there's bound to be local architect, engineer locally who will give their advice, their time, for free. I get involved in my local village here. I'm involved in a capital project with them. I give them my time for free because it's going to benefit my community. Now, I'm not going to fundraise for them. I'm not going to go out and do fundraising. I'm not going to go to loads and loads of meetings, but I am at the end of the phone call and at the end of an email. If they want help with an application, that I'll do for them. Look for accountants, solicitors, HR consultants, health and safety consultants, anyone out there that you need to pay to do stuff for, pay for services. Ask can they do for free if they're involved locally in the community. They will. Most will. Some won't. Some will. Again, look for stuff. Looking like we would see a lot of community groups, or not sorry, community groups, Thai towns groups that would get bedding plants for roundabouts, for hanging baskets. They would get them donated by a local garden centre. They'd put in a sign saying kindly, supported and sponsored by XYZ Garden Centre Limited. They would have gone to maybe maybe company doing, say, recycled plastic furniture, and they might have got a seating supplied to them for free or whatever. They've been getting down a second-hand route and whatever it might be. But you're trying to find ways of, if I don't have to spend money on something, can I get this thing for free? Because it saves them what you have to pay for. Again, I know a lot of companies would have gone to maybe local paint shops. They needed to paint their front of the resource centre. Didn't have any money for painting. Got the paint donated, and they always basically turned up on Saturday morning with paintbrushes and paint to the front of this resource centre. Saved themselves maybe 1,500 euros by doing that. A bit of fun, bit of a laugh. No, it might be the most professional job in the world done, but it was done. So there's always ways and means of doing stuff without having to go and get money for it. So the key thing, I suppose, what we look at in terms of planning, and this is something that we and I can send you a template of this, or simply go out and buy a wall chart and put it on the wall, where you're actually looking at your calendar of events. So you're looking at what sort of funds do we need to bring in. So you look at your grants in terms of, okay, as they become available, you're marking them down when they're available. Your fundraising activity, you might be marking out when you're going to do your golf classic or annual social or whatever fundraising you're going to do. And you then look at, so if that's your target date to do a golf classic, your work will start that probably before January, even, like in terms of getting organized for it, in terms of planning, sponsors, selling, tea times, getting your event organized, getting your prizes organized, all that kind of stuff takes time. So you want to give yourself plenty of time to plan it. So again, you're marking out when the deadline is, and then you're marking out when you're going to start the timeline to actually work towards that deadline. Again, if you're looking after sponsors, when's the best time to go to sponsors? No point going to sponsors in November, because they'll be probably doing their budgets for the following year in around September, October. Okay, if you're not too sure, ask them. If you know someone working in a company, say, okay, when do you do your financial budgets every year for the following year? We do them in October. That's when you need to talk to them. If you're doing your budgets, do you want to allocate sponsorship in your marketing costs? If you do you want to put us down as your sponsor, as your main partner for sponsorship for the year? That then means that if anyone comes in looking for sponsorship, you can say we've already signed up with this organization for this year. Okay, so again, plan us well ahead of time. And this doesn't have to be, it's not overly complicated in terms of, it's a calendar. It's literally a wall chart that you're marking out when our deadlines are, when we need to start working towards getting these things done, because there is a lot of planning involved in it. If you plan, give yourself plenty of time, you will generate way more money. That is fact, guaranteed, backed up by our own knowledge in terms of stuff we've been involved with. And I can guarantee you, if you do things last minute, you're not going to maximize the amount of funding you want to get. The last one I want to look at is grants. I'm not going to spend much time on this because there is a complete workshop dedicated to this, which I think is on possibly next week. I need to check that before we finish up. So apply for grants. The key thing really is finding out where I can get information about grants. So there's the sources that we use, and I say we as in myself in terms of my company, because we always keep an eye out for what grants are coming up, because we would then inform our the groups we work with that there's possible funding there that they can avail of, and obviously that benefits us as well. So we don't do, we do because we want to help out, but we also want to do it because it's part of our business. Active Link is a website that has updated information on training available, funding available, sponsorship available, employment opportunities available, and that's regularly updated daily and weekly. Funding Point is a website that was established by the Wheel. The Wheel.ie is an umbrella organization supporting community voluntary organizations. Funding Point is a database of grants that are and funds that are currently available. And that's updated every time a new grant every time a grant is announced, is put up on that. So again, that's a subscription site. I think it's about maybe $120 for the year, so it's not massive money. It's about just keeping an eye on that to see what grants are available. Some grants on it won't be applicable to you at all. They're very much localized specific areas. Other grants will be. So it's about keeping an eye on them. And if you go into irelandgov.ie, it's a website basically list of all the government departments. Look at the government departments that are relevant to your organization and the work you do. There is some departments that will be relevant, to be other departments that won't be relevant to your organization. Get on the mailing list of the organizations that are relevant to you. Okay, so if you're on their mailing list, every time a grant has become available, they have to publicly announce it. So there will be a situation where they'll be announcing that, whether it be through press release, on their website, through local press, obviously. But if you're on their mailing list, they will email you that press release, or just ask them to email you the press release when it comes in. So you get automatically get updates from the department directly itself. Networking, talk to other groups, ask them where they got funding from. So if you see a project and they've done very, very well, they got funding, ask them straight up, where'd you get money for that? Who'd you apply to? That might be in Cork, you could look at anywhere, any county, and say, your project is very similar to our project. Where did you get the money from? Where did you get the funding from? Newspapers, again, will be announced in papers. The PPN then as well. So through the PPN, the key objective of the PPN in every county is central resource for the community sector within the county, and provide information and networking opportunities and things that, and sharing information. So again, the PPN would be aware of, or should be aware of, grants as they become available. And again, you can find out through them in terms of what's out there. So basically what you're doing is you've got pretty much 4 or 5 sources of information about grants as they become live. So there's no reason to be unaware of a grant. There's nothing worse than someone find out a week after a deadline for a grant that there was a grant that they could have applied for last week. They missed the boat, and that boat won't come around for another year. So you've missed out in 12 months of an opportunity. The key thing then is, once you've identified what the grants that are out there, see, do they match your aims, objectives? Are they relevant to your organization? Do not start chasing grants for the sake of it, because it just brings more work on for your organization. Chances are you're going to get turned on because it's not relevant anyway. Or if you do get the funding, you're now in a situation where thinking, okay, we got the funding, what the hell are we going to do with it? We got the funding for something we don't actually do. Now we got to create a project, to spend this money. Now you're adding more problems to your organization more than solving it, which doesn't make any sense. Like we see groups and they're saying, well, we apply for a grant for that, but it's not, you don't need it. Yeah, but it's money, but you can only spend it on what you apply for. So if you need money for a roof, and there's a grant out there for, for planting, there's no point applying for it because it's not relevant to your project. And again, people think, Ash, we can change it. They won't. If you apply for X, Y, and Z, you've got to spend the money on X, Y, and Z. They can't. In some cases, they might know you change it, but you got to ask for permission. Chances are you won't get it. How much you need and what you need for. So again, some cases the grants are so small they won't even make a dent on what you actually need to spend money on. So some grants are very small, maybe €1,000. If you're looking at a €500,000 project, getting €1,000 is a pure waste of time. Is the grant available, worth the trouble of applying? A lot of times we say to groups, it'd be a lot easier for you to fundraise this money. It'd be a lot easier to borrow the money and pay it off over 12 months than it is to actually get the grant. Because as for all of you who've been involved in grant aid and getting grants in the past, the bureaucracy that circulates around them is crazy. You know, again, you got to spend the money first, draw it down. There's usually delays and drawdowns. The paperwork involved is sometimes fairly onerous. You know, for large grants, absolutely worth it. For smaller grants, sometimes you question, is it worth it? And then finally, are you eligible? No, if you're not eligible and you don't realize you're eligible, that means you haven't read the criteria, which is, you know, unforgivable. So read the criteria. It will be very clear in terms of what groups are not eligible for funding in this grant round. If you're not eligible, there's no point applying or trying to argue the point. You know, it's very, very clear. The next thing then, I suppose, really types of grants, the specific grant aid that's available, that comes up once a year. It's kind of regular funding, comes out every year, like say Community Support Fund, for example, Town and Village Renewal Scheme, CLAR funding, all those funds, they come up every year. They're usually for one-off projects, one-off funding. So they won't fund like ongoing operational costs. They won't fund things like loan repayments. They won't create a reserve for you. They're for one-off projects. You get the money in, you spend it, that's it, done, job done. Then you got annual grants, and some organizations would be annually funded. So for example, Family Resource Centre would get annual funding from TUSLA. You've got a lot of disability organizations out there providing disability services on behalf of the health and the HSE. They would be funded under Section 38 or Section 39 grants, and there'd be annual grants that would be paid out to cover staffing costs and some operational costs. They're not automatically given. You have to come back with reports, you know, submit returns. You've got to do, you know, your work plan, your business plan for the following year, give the targets, all that. So it's not a matter of just turning up and getting the money. You've got to jump a lot of hoops to get the money each year, but it is annual funding. There is the old community services program, which is not old, it's still there, and that would be funding for annual funding for salaries, maybe manager, maybe 2 or 3 employees. They are reviewing that program, and they're reviewing the whole social enterprise program in Ireland. So the chances are they create a new, or there could be a new social enterprise program which will cover and provide employment supports for social enterprises. So that's a space to watch and look at and keep an eye on. Again, the steps involved: research the grants, know the deadlines, have your consultation done. So have your needs analysis done, show there's a need for the project, no point in applying for it if there's not. All the documentation that they require, they'll ask for, have that ready on file, so it's ready to go by the deadline. We would always recommend groups that are going to be applying for funding to put a generic application together. So it might be an application you've already done. Keep that in file, because 70% of the information in that application is going to be used the same for the next application. Cut and paste. You know, pretty much a lot of the applications are exact same information. As look for, like, you know, obviously your organization details, contact details, addresses, aims, objectives, you know, structures, all that's standard. You know, that doesn't change regularly. So just cut and paste it from other applications rather than have to go back and rewrite application after application the whole time. I'll say complete the application form and submit it on time with the documentation. The funding organization, just keep an eye on what their aims are. So they will have, that fund will be linked to specific aims they have. Your organization should mirror those aims, or your project should at least mirror those aims. So for example, if sports funding is available to increase participation in sport by girls in sport and female participants in sport, your project should be focusing on that. So it should be like, we're going to build extra dressing rooms, so we got both male and female dressing rooms. We're going to do a mentor program where female mentors, female sports people from the club are going to go into the girls' schools and work with them on coaching to get involved in our club. We're going to get involved in, you know, we're going to increase our coaching staff. You know, at the moment we've got only 3 women involved. We're encouraging more to get involved on the coaching side of it. They're things that will mirror the aims of the fund. Okay, so again, it has to be relevant to the actual fund you're going for. Again, criteria, the amounts available, the closing dates, the application process, all in a post-grant administration. All this is available when they announce a grant. All this is available on the information they will provide with the grant. So the criteria, the terms and conditions, the guidelines, all that's available. They'll give you as much information as possible to make sure you complete a good application, because they don't want rubbish applications coming in. So they literally hold your hand with the application process, and they normally provide, if it's a large application, they do, like, say, webinars with information about how to complete the application form. They give you tutorials on it. They'll answer questions on it, because they want to make sure that the standard applications coming through are very, very good. And they also want to reduce the amount of people that are applying for the sake of applying. So again, in terms of the documentation, I'm just going to just quickly, because we do cover it in more detail, the project proposal. if it's required, if it's a large scale project, it will be a requirement to submit an actual proposal or plan. Constitution or your members and articles of association, depending if you're a company or just constituted group. If your project requires planning permission, details of the planning permission. They need to see if you own the building or if you're leasing the building. So the legal status there in terms of if you've got deeds or if you've got a lease in place. If it's a capital project, they'll want that property to be insured. So details of your insurance, your annual accounts, or your financial reports. If you're just to have a treasurer's report, if you've got audited accounts, your accountant will provide you with those. Your annual reports, if you're not doing annual reports, you should be, because they're looked for. So it's basically reporting what you've achieved throughout the year. Again, all you're doing is basically backing up your argument that they should give you funding. Is why it's important to submit an annual report. Any technical information like plans, drawings, bill of quantities, quotations, that kind of stuff they would look for. Tax clearance details and any other documentation they require. Okay, so if they require a pint of blood, you provide them with a pint of blood. They will look for some groups, organizations don't look for much information. Some organizations then will look for an awful lot of technical documentation. That's a problem for a lot of groups because they don't know where that documentation is. They don't know if the accountant has it, the solicitor has it, does the treasurer have it, does the chairperson have it, who has it, and they can't find it. And they can't find it in time, so therefore it doesn't go off with the application, therefore the application is deemed ineligible. Okay, so have everything in file, really important, and we talk about that a lot in that workshop. So why are applications rejected? Primarily because way more people look for money than there's actually money available. So it might be €1 million available and there's about €4 million worth of applications in. So just there's too many people looking for it. It's not eligible, which again is kind of like is unforgivable if you're submitting an application that isn't eligible, but a lot of people do. People miss deadlines the whole time. Absolutely, because one, they just forget about it, or two, just they're not organized. A poor application, which I've seen, there's been a lot of very poor applications in the last 2 years because a lot of the COVID applications were fairly straightforward and easy, and people got the bad habits of writing very simple applications. Some of the standards applications, I just don't know how people expect to get money, like, just really, really poor. Certain sections not completed, spelling mistakes, no real reasons given for anything, people putting down, on an answer to a question, please refer to question 3 or something like that. Like, that's just laziness. And like that's become a problem over the last 2 years with applications that I've noticed. No consultation shown. So you've given no rationale as to why the project is needed. The organization might have a very poor track record with the funder. Again, if you're getting funds from a department, don't mess them about in terms of paperwork or administration or drawdowns or reporting, because they'll remember you and say, we gave these people funding last year. They were a nightmare to deal with. We're not going to get them funding again. They won't say that, but they just won't give it funding. The supporting documentation is required. Was not just submitted. Again, no needs analysis like the consultation process. There was nothing there to show that this is needed. And then the one of the biggest one that catches most people out is that this don't have the matching funds available. Maybe €100,000 project, maybe 80% of a grant, they have to come up with 20%, which is €20,000. They just don't have the money in the account to show it's there when they need to show it. So there are reasons why applications are rejected. And again, grants planning template that we use simply is list the name of the grants that you're going to be applying for. The source, as they become available, you write announcements, might be, let's say, community support fund, source, Cork County Council, the contact person is whoever it is in the council. We might be putting it towards our re-roofing project. The deadline is, let's say, July the 1st. What's required? You make a list of everything that's required. What actions do we need to do to prepare? So do we need planning permission? Do we need quotations? Do we need the lease in place? Do we need this, that, and the other in place? Then, nominate people to be responsible for getting those things together. So might have maybe 3 or 4 people on a team. One person says, I'll get the lease sorted out. The other person, I'll get the quotations, whatever. And then set deadlines to get those work in place. So you're really planning. You're planning this the whole time. So if we're doing a grant application for someone or an organization, we send them this template. Okay, we fill in basically these parts that are here, what's required, the actions. Then we get them to nominate someone that's going to be responsible for it, and we give them a deadline to get that information back to us. So if it's a J club or a sports club or whatever organization, we will then hound that person saying, I need this information by Wednesday. If I don't have by Wednesday, we won't be able to submit the application by next Thursday. Okay, so we didn't manage the project for them in terms of the grant application process. So it means that the applications get in time and done properly. So this is a very simple template that we use to manage the project. So then in terms of the fundraising and sorry, the sourcing funding in general, okay, and this is to wrap up. Always evaluate every year what we did this year, how good we were at it. Did we achieve our targets? Did we make more money than we set out to make, or did we make less money? So what did we do? How do we do it? Could we have done it better? Who was involved? And this is key. So who's always involved in fundraising, but who's the people who basically run for the hills when they're asked to get involved in fundraising? What are the committee members who turn up to talk but don't get involved, right? And name them and shame them and say, okay, well, look, you know, we want committed people here who are going to get involved, who are going to help us with fundraising. What were we strong at? What were we weak at? And is there any feedback? So get feedback from your funders. If you get turned off from a grant, don't give out to them and, you know, rant and rave and start calling names and stuff. Ring up and ask them, say, okay, we appreciate the opportunity. We're obviously disappointed we didn't get funding, but we'd like to find out where we fell down on the application so we can actually go next year with a better application. If a sponsor says, no, I'm not getting involved, ask them why. They might say, couldn't care less, or, you know, I've already given sponsorship to someone else, or don't have the money. Just find out. Okay. But look at the reasons as to why you're not successful, because you need to basically improve on that the next year. Otherwise, you'll be making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and you just get very, very frustrated. So evaluate this fundraising effort. In summary, as I said, planning is absolutely, in anything you do in life, it's important. When it comes to successfully generating funds and enough of funds for your community voluntary organization, or your voluntary, your group or club you're working with or volunteering with, it is vital that you plan for it, because there's so many moving parts with funding and fundraising and grants, and it's constant throughout the year. It will get very overwhelming if it's not planned and organized properly. Very important, really, really important. Wall chart, very simple thing, very cheap thing to buy in an aid station shop. Use that as your guide to planning all your activity throughout the year. You can see what you're doing, what you're not doing, what's coming up, what's not coming up. Make sure you review your operational costs. You know, costs are increasing, as we know, across the board. In some cases, they're getting ridiculously high. Energy costs off the charts, insurance costs getting higher and higher every year. Okay, you need to be wary of that. Can we cut back on costs? If we can't, we need to bring in more money every year. If you're spending money foolishly and stuff, cut it out, right? Get in energy audits in your buildings. The best thing you can do is get an energy audit in your building at the moment to see, is there a way we can reduce our heating costs here. Don't start the project unless you can sustain it. Okay, don't go off and build some extension that will cost you money year after year that you're not going to be able to sustain. Okay, there's lots of empty buildings out there that were grant dated over many years ago that shut down after 5 or 6 years because they realized we can't keep the doors open. We can't bring in enough money to keep the place open. Stay informed about all the grant dates. So keep an eye on those websites, sign up to them. Keep, not to go on them every day. Things don't happen every single day, but at least once a week, spend 10 minutes over a cup of coffee and say, okay, let's just check those sites. Is anything here that's relevant to us that I can bring to my meeting next week? Prepare a generic proposal that can be used for future applications. Standard generic information that's on hand that you can cut and paste when you want to put an application together. Very important to form a finance committee. Now, some people don't like committees or working groups or teams, and I don't believe in having like 10 committees in an organization here, because it's just a waste of time. The one organization committee that you should have and subcommittee you should have is a finance committee. Vital. The finance committee isn't just about signing checks and ticking boxes and making sure things done right. The finance committee is the ones that are responsible for fundraising. They need to have a team of people that are going committed that will go out there and fundraise for you. Again, plan all your fundraising activity, work smarter, not harder. Very important in life, hugely important when it comes to fundraising. One large fundraiser is going to take a lot of time, brings in multiple of money compared to small fundraisers take a lot of time and don't bring in a fraction of that money. If you can charge fees, look at optimizing the fee structure. Now, don't lose your sight of the fact that you're social enterprises or your community groups that get social objectives. You're not out there to, make huge money and make loads of profit, but look at your fee structure that will bring you in more money than you need, because that's the reserve that you want to build up over time. You need that reserve. Typically we would say to a group, you should have 13 weeks reserve in an account that will cover light, heat, insurance, keep the doors open for 13 weeks in the case that's nothing, if things are slowing down and funding's not coming in. Some groups will work on a 12-month basis. They have enough money for 12 months of operational costs in reserve just in case things go wrong. In the current climate after the pandemic, that's probably not realistic now, but you want to be aiming for something that is at least beyond just having a couple of weeks of reserve in place. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the share again and go back here. There's a lot in that because we did cover everything in terms of all the funding options and fundraising options and different things like that tonight. Over the next number of weeks, we're going to be looking at each of those individually in terms of going into way more detail on each of them in terms of grants, fundraising, sponsors, all that. But tonight I was going to give you an idea in terms of the kind of multiple source of funds that are out there you can look at bringing into your organization. It can be very overwhelming. I know that because being involved in it but as a consultant and involved in it within organizations as well. But as I said, if you plan it and you have enough bodies around a committee helping you with it, it is possible to generate and raise a lot of money. It is, without doubt. But it does take time. It does take support. But look, we kind of know that when we're going to get involved in a community and volunteer organization, or if we're employed by a community volunteer organization, we know that this is part of the deal we sign up to. You know, anyone who goes into a community group as a volunteer, as a paid employee, thinking it's going to be, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, happy out, they're mistaken. There's a lot of work involved in it, but the rewards are huge, and that's why we get involved in this work we do. Have you any questions on what we covered this evening, or any comments or anything like that you want to discuss with me? I just thought before that also, just going to give you my email address as well if you want to take it down. And it's going to be on the slides anyway, that we send them out, but just in case you don't get them in time. So my email is tom@olatc.ie. So it's tom@olatc.ie. So that's short for O'Leary and Associates Training Consultancy Limited, which would be a long-winded email if I was using that. I will be sending out the slides to you as well as PDF slides, the slides we went through this evening. Okay. And my email will be on that also. Any questions you have at all about what we discussed this evening, or any questions you have about fundraising and that, you're thinking, okay, I need to ask Tom this, or maybe get a second opinion on it, feel free to email me. As part of the work I do with any organization, whether it be the PPN or local development company, if we do training like this for groups, we do say to them, look, we do offer support between workshops as well for people that might need to have questions for us. We're not talking about drumming up business or anything here. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking to come back and telling me quote on this or that. Or if you've got an idea or question you want to ask and you're not too sure about it, feel free to ask me by email. Sorry, Christine, you have your hand up there, yeah?
Hi, Tom. Just a quick question. I know tonight now you concentrated an awful lot on capital projects. Now, I'm involved in Ballycotton Community Hall, and we haven't any capital project on at the moment, but we're more interested in annual funding. Yep. Perhaps you might say a bit more about that and some of the other workshops about how you could, the most successful ways for annual funding, if you wouldn't mind.
On the fundraising workshop, that'd be the key one, Christine, there, because the grants workshop is relevant to a point, but grants are normally for one-off or for capital. There's no grants for operational costs. So there's the fundraising one, that's a big key one for yourself. I think we're doing another one on maybe online fundraising as well. So there's 2, I think, workshops on fundraising. But certainly, we will be covering that in detail, because I am conscious of the fact that a lot of people are not looking at grants, but they're looking at how we bring in money elsewhere.
That's it. That's great. Thanks very much, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or no? All good. Okay, so as I said, we will be I'll be sending out the PDF of these slides to Sandy or to Patrick from the PPN, and they'll be forwarded on to you because I don't have your email addresses. And also the recording of the slides workshop too will be made available, I think, on their YouTube channel, I think they have, so or on their website or something, so that'll be made available as well. And you have the details of the other workshops, I think, have you? On the next 3 Monday nights. So again, I'd encourage you to attend those if you can as well, because we're going to get a bit more detail on each of those over the next while, or over the next 3 Mondays. So again, thanks very much for this evening. Apologies for going over time. These things tend to go on a bit, but again, hopefully see you all next week, next Monday night. As I said, any questions at all, feel free to email me between here next Monday.
So
Yep, that's great. Thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.